Right now, let's welcome onto the show Sam Bruchhaus, who is with SumerSports. They did a really nice piece on the trade deadline coming up, on the projected values of some of the players that could be on the move. I think you guys should go check it out. It is worth your while. Sam, it's Grant and Danny here in D.C. How are you?
I'm doing good. I've been listening along to y'all's Halloween commentary, and I'm from South Louisiana, around the New Orleans area. And I gotta agree, Halloween goes back years and years and years. I'm a big Halloween guy.
Rightfully so. Rightfully so. Way to endear yourself to the. It's like cutting a promo in a road city, like for wrestling. You know, like how many people here like Washington, and then you go nuts. Way to go, dude.
You're getting a little more candy talk than you normally would, because around these parts, Sam, we've been talking almost exclusively about the Commanders as buyers and about the trade deadline over the last few days. What's your take on how legitimate they are as the number one team in EPA per play on offense and a 6-2 division leader right now?
I think they're legitimate. I've loved Jane Daniels going all the way back to the Florida State game, which ended up being an LSU loss, but was the beginning of his Heisman campaign. I love how mobile he is. He's so accurate on the perimeter. And not only does the film tell you that, all of our stats that use tracking data and artificial intelligence tell us that as well. I think as long as Jane Daniels is on the field, they're looking great. But even better when Mariota was on the field, they performed really, really well. And I'm really excited to see how Terry McLaurin has been utilized by Cliff Kingsbury. The defense looked a little shaky at the beginning of the year. They're starting to round into form. I love the Commanders. That's a big piece in the NFC.
What should they do here? And what do you think they will do?
It's really interesting. I'd be shocked if they weren't having conversations about the cornerback position. We've seen Mikey Sandersville, the draft pick, play okay. You know, St. Juste, Forbes haven't been super consistent throughout their careers. I think Newsome from the Cleveland Browns could be an interesting target. And then you look at some of the other teams. You look at the Panthers. Would they be willing to part with someone like J.C. Horn? I don't think so, but I'd be making the call if I was the Commanders.
So my philosophy on this deadline is, yes, they should be aggressive, but I don't think they should rent anybody. You know, I'd be open, I suppose, to a late round pick next year or something for someone that could get you to the finish line. But I'm really not that interested in that, honestly. I think they're good enough to make some noise in the playoffs this year, but I would be looking to add for 2-3 years from now while adding for this postseason run as well. And that's why I really like the idea of, say, a Greg Newsome, who you referenced, the 24-year-old who went to the University of Georgia, was a first-round pick, 26th overall. What would that cost a guy like, say, Newsome? Because it's not very often teams get rid of early-round picks who are starters. I think that one makes sense because the Browns already paid Denzel Ward, and are you going to pay him as well? So you're trying to, like, find that Venn diagram that fits both teams. But what's your thought on his price tag?
Yeah, the weird thing with this cornerback market is we really haven't seen any, big-time certified starter cornerback trades in recent years. We've seen Stephon Gilmore get kind of passed around. That was, a mid to late round pick. The superstar that got traded, Jalen Ramsey, years ago from Jacksonville to the Los Angeles Rams, that was kind of a super deal for a defensive player of the year type candidate. I think somewhere in those mid-round picks, which – we talk about them as if they're throwaway picks, but in the third round, you can get guys that are certified starters in any given year. So they really are quite valuable. And I think that's probably what it would take to get Newsome. I'm on your side as well, though. I think the Commanders probably have a good team, a guy that they would trade for. Would they really put him over the edge? Probably not, based on who's available. I think they should probably hold tight with their picks. I agree with you right there.
Sam Bruchhaus with us from SumerSports. And that's where I was going to go here, Sam. This is so hard, right? Obviously, you're better with better players. Duh, right? But how much bang for your buck can you get here at this deadline? In other words, how much better could they get with one new piece, two new pieces, whatever it is? Like, what is their ceiling this year? Because I still think, and maybe this is, a blasphemy around these parts with all the goodwill that's happening, they're still a tick below that real honest-to-goodness Super Bowl contender, and maybe a move around the edge won't really put them over the top. Maybe that's not the point. What's their ceiling even with a little bit of improvement here?
Now, as you guys know, if you have a quarterback, you can compete, and we've seen that time and time again. I think with Jane Daniels in the mix, they're certainly, like you said, a tick below This is a really interesting year, though, in the NFC and really in the NFL more generally, because there's so many rookie quarterbacks that are playing who are still – I think Jaden has been a check mark. There's still some question marks with some of the other guys. And for my money, there's really only 3 teams that are certified Super Bowl contenders right now. The Ravens, maybe. Their defense is struggling. They're trying to add pieces to their offense. They added Deontay Johnson from the Panthers yesterday. I think the Chiefs obviously are for real. They have Patrick Mahomes. They're sitting at an undefeated record. And I think to round that group out, the Lions have played fantastic. But if you're not in those 3, I think you certainly have a chance, and you hope for an injury in those top-tier teams. And I think the piece for the Commanders that would put them over the top would be a corner. I don't know if a guy like that would be there. So I think that's kind of where they sit right now.
What would it take for you to flip the switch to ultra aggressive, where now you're willing to say part with, I don't know, a 2 this year and a 4 in the future or something like that for this rebuilding team, although they're way ahead of schedule, that has all these picks and second most money going into the next offseason? Like, what kind of a deal would you be looking at to just go way outside your plan and kind of break glass in case of emergency?
If you are having conversations to get a really premium player at the edge position, I think that makes a difference for the Commanders and makes a difference for, frankly, a lot of teams. I think there's some guys who are probably in the median that are certainly available. I'm talking about a guy like Zadarius Smith. That wouldn't necessarily – that'd probably be a mid-round pick there. But if you could get a guy like Trey Hendrickson, who is on the Bengals, who have had – a lot of weird stuff go on with their contracts. They're pretty cash conservative. They declined to extend Jamar Chase this year. They franchise tag T. Higgins. Are they going to be able to pay Trey Hendrickson in 2 years? If they don't think so, maybe you send him out. I wouldn't be shocked if he would be, a second and a third round pick. And then obviously the guys like Max Crosby, who I think are off of the table right now, but who knows, if the right deal comes in, maybe 2 first round picks, that could be like a break glass situation to get a defensive player of the year type sack guy.
Sam, I've made the case that obviously this offense, talking about Washington, has been so good. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The red zone struggles, I think, some of it's fluky, some of it, maybe design or whatever. But I thought against some really good teams, which will probably be their postseason time, they could use one more you can't stop this guy type weapon. And it's not as if they grow on trees, but maybe schematically there's somebody out there. A, your thoughts on that, thinking about a receiver opposite Terry McLaurin to take some pressure off for those third downs, et cetera, or against some good opponents. And B, if you agree, who might be out there that could fit that?
Yeah, it's tough with Amari Cooper having moved and Devontae Adams having moved and now Deontay Johnson having moved. A lot of those pieces have already gone past. I agree with you on the red zone struggles. I think you have to be really interesting in your design. We've seen that with how the Lions have played. And I think you just have to attack your weapons. And I think teams know, the book is out on the Commanders, that it's going to be the Jaden show, the Brian Robinson show, or the Terry McLaurin show back there. I have my own like Jacoby Myers out there in Las Vegas. I think that's probably the best guy you can get in terms of another receiving weapon there. That would probably cost a pretty penny, though. He's their wide receiver 1 out there at this point with Devontae gone. I think that'd probably be, a third or fourth round pick there that you'd have to give up to get a Jacoby Myers type guy.
So we've wrestled with this, and Sam Bruchhaus is our guest from SumerSports. They're number 1 in EPA per play. They are number 1 in scoring going into last week. I'm not a believer in the perspective or the paradigm. If you're high rated statistically, you shouldn't try to upgrade because the season has ebbs and flows, and we've seen Kingsbury's system and scheme get figured out in the second half anyway. But I don't necessarily want to break up a really good thing they've got. I know it sounds kind of silly, but I think they're really buying into this brotherhood bit, and it's a very tight-knit group, and everyone's adapting well to their roles. What's your reason or logic on that as far as maybe it'd be nice to have another weapon on offense, but it's going so well. Do you really want to change anything? I've watched MLB teams in the past go get a closer that should have been lights out, but all of a sudden, the bullpen rules changed and guys weren't happy. And next thing you know, it did more damage than good.
Yeah, I think that locker room culture is absolutely key. I played football down at Tulane University, and my Green Wave will be coming up to the DMV here in 2 weeks. for probably what will end up being an American Conference playoff game against Navy to try to get into the title game there. But you just get this certain feel when you're in a locker room and you start putting together 2, 3, 4 games. And I know there's debates on whether momentum is real, but I think we all know that confidence is real. And it's clear that Dan Quinn has the confidence in Jaden Daniels and his leaders on defense. I want to highlight Frankie Luvu. He's been fantastic this year. Just an absolute beast and the real heartbeat of that team as a larger unit. And I think it's a little different in football because typically they're trading draft picks. But if you got everyone in there, maybe you don't want to mix up the chemistry. A lot of the guys are pulling together. They're seeing the growth of their teammates. I kind of agree with you there. There definitely is a locker room component that must be considered.
Let's go a little bit further league-wide here, Sam. And Sam Bruchhaus with us from SumerSports. Give me a couple of moves that you go, this just makes too much sense not to do.
It makes perfect sense for me for Budda Baker to go to the Vikings. Now, that's a primo kind of trade. Budda Baker's a multi-time All-Pro, multi-time Pro Bowler. And right now the Vikings sit at, an elite team in the NFC in terms of record. However, they're struggling in the back end. They kind of have 3 guys back there, Harrison Smith and some of their other safeties who they kind of rotate in. But their back end is really struggling. We've seen that in their elite matchups the last 2 games, trying to stop Puka Nacua and trying to stop Cooper Kupp. And then the game before that, trying to stop Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jared Goff's passing attack. This was the highlight for the Vikings in the early year, that they wouldn't be able to cover the pass. I think Flores did a really good job of scheming stuff up in the early season. But I think as teams start to figure that out, it could get a little sketchy for the Minnesota Vikings. We could see them regress a little bit. You know who would change that? Budda Baker. Just an absolute all-you-can-do-it safety. He sits with he's on the last year of his contract. The Cardinals, they sit at 4-4. Are you competing if you're the Cardinals? They're really not great in net points. They're more around teams like the Saints and the Browns in terms of net points. If you don't think you compete and you think that you can greatly improve your team for the future by adding, a couple mid-round picks for All-Pro Budda Baker, then I think that's the move you got to make. It makes sense for both sides in my mind.
If the Bengals were to lose to the Raiders, could T. Higgins be in play? And what would he cost right now? He's been banged up. He's going to miss the game again, it looks like.
I think the Bengals, alongside the Cardinals, are one of the most interesting teams at this deadline because, frankly, their offense has been incredible, particularly when T. Higgins is on the field. And Joe Burrow is having like an MVP-type year very quietly. If they were able to string a couple games together, I think we'd start seeing his odds improve there. However, their defense is just awful. I don't know if their defense can improve. They have good players. They have Trey Hendrickson and some of these other guys. I think that T. Higgins could very well become available, given that, negotiations stalled and now he's on a franchise tag. It's unlikely they're going to bring him back, at least for the money that he wants. When I was looking at trades, you look at the Amari Cooper trade from years ago with the Cowboys involved in that. That was for 1 first-round pick for a younger guy, At the time, Amari Cooper was a certified wide receiver 1. That may add some context there that may change kind of the calculus of the negotiation. But I'd expect him to go for at least, a first or a second, certainly.
Sam, why do you think in general for so many years there wasn't much trade deadline activity like there is in other sports? And now businesses seem to have picked up a little bit when it comes to the trade deadline. It actually has meaning. We've already seen some moves kind of to your point. Just big picture, why do you think it was one way and now it seems to be changing?
I think Brett Veach highlighted this really well, the general manager of the Chiefs. And he said in the NFL, and as you know, it's not for long in the NFL, you got to be all in every year. And that's how these guys kind of approach it. I think in football, where you have guys really putting their body on the line, the contracts are really short. You can really lose chemistry if you try to lose. We kind of saw this with the Patriots a little bit, kind of inexplicably starting Brissett until allegedly, the locker room kind of went south on that organization. And I think that's why. I think if you start trading away a bunch of good guys, the teams might quit on you. I think there's a lot of worries about that. I don't think it's necessarily analytically based. I think some of the teams that are very analytical, such as the Ravens, typically make moves at this time. But I think it's more of a chemistry thing and a personal thing than anything dealing with the numbers or dealing with hard business.